take your guns and it's time to suit up in your red, white, and blues and use your weapons to protect your freedom and country from drone strikes against brown guard of the Middle East to slaughter of black youth and streets of Chicago. The military-industrial complex controls our every movement thought. The symbolic power of guns controls our epistemology and violence become normalized. Row 110. Gun violence has produced a culture soaked in blood. Shootings have become routine. Society relies upon the violence culture. That violence going to be abstracted from business violence, job of the industry, the military, foreign policy in the state, tools and forces, domestic terrorism against black youth, the shot like government police to replace all the area self-interest pushed back on the consumers and predominance of relatively unchecked gun culture. It's evident the power of the gun lobby, the imperial policy not matched by lawlessness and state repression, which moves feed on each other. Civil society it's generating military organizations. The police now use discourse power to criminalize behavior. The cops act and insecurity. They're criminalizing individuals and advancing political sovereignty has been replaced by economic sovereignty. Lobbying is now carried out by the NRA. Military station represents powerful social logic. That is constitutive of values, identity, public values, critical citizenship, anti-public intellectuals, militarism seems to every institution, including schools, people considered disposable because they advance the financially, militarism provide support the policy protect the unknown, the American non-merely, and again, they're also entertained by this mimicking foreign policy towards and charter the culture also offers false sense of security, the one that also makes sure Americans are armed so they can protect themselves. The operation would by the politician gun rights. We have a discord that ignored harsh neoliberal corporate state policy. Modern culture not go falling off. Guns are symbolic as well as actual violent fantasies have proliferated. The government refuses to act gun control. The systematic of death of democracy, the not so hidden politics. Works one to harm the collapse of the militarized culture that financially the country of approximately 300 million firearms, which other which handgun teach gun to made to kill as quickly as possible. And militarism permeates even the spaces we occupy and has killed democracy, challenges ideological stronghold on the academy is key to creating the viable alternative to change. Thus, roll the ballots, vote for the debate whose advocacy best breaks down our militaristic culture of violence. Row 15. It is crucial that intellectuals unite to reclaim among such actions, testing, interrogating the material and symbolic forces. The height of unacademic claims parts of matters of education must be at the heart of any politics. Politics aim at the education through such recognition steps to be taken to help to powerful ideological spaces, politics of amnesia and disinformation machine. Disassembled to help create the meaningful alternative. And our approach to fighting militarism must begin with tangible action theory. After real solution is useless as action to enforce from theory. Drill 14. Understanding what's related to the political terrestrial solution and enact concrete solution, we need to think about what kind of the system we engage in. The real solution with the power society, what's best critical link enforcement action, stereotypical action from theory, we need the politics, but it make knowledge meaningful. And gun culture replicates patriarchal nationalism and neoliberalism. Men get guns to protect their families from those marked as criminal. Government 14. Only guns produce a national identity such as individualism has become a label. American such discourses have been used to carry out brutal assimilation and more the emphasis on being a liberal subject, which is the guiding principle of many in the community. Nothing more has become suited to the capacity to historical pillars of colonialism, capitalism, patriarchal nationalism. Great individuals who are likely unknowing conformity to see the comments today if they need the guns to protect themselves from Indians who would attack them themselves like Indians who were lived peacefully. Gun woman to the tapestry of the USA, the Protestant authority, and settlers time reinforced white supremacist discourse formation to those who are defined as bad order, as well as toward the dimension those who allow certain hegemonic status. The voice and difference constructed lead to repressive effects. And gun rights fuel suspicion and collective. They atomize individuals and amplify fear and prejudice. To Brander 15. Fragmentation of society atomizing individuals rather than right for oppression. There's no individual more extreme under the gun rights and arguments against the collective. Individuals can impulsive act private arguments according to the prejudice. Armed represents suspicion of the collective. The gun sever the pair from the community that causes threat to other people. Guns are go at alone. The gun movement that pits individuals against society. The collective are important. The movement to offer radical individualism. And this is individualism is not freedom, but rather an insidious form of socioeconomic Darwinism, hiding its neoliberal lie. Row 14. Neoliberal policies have resulted in economic Darwinism promotes commodification, deregulation, neoliberalism attempts to undermine all forms of this solidarity, capable of challenging the market values, promoting individualism almost pathological, and it's safe for the community. The Darwinism unleashed thinking when social problems reduce the individual flock. Neoliberalism best trick is to persuade individuals that they should map themselves as solitary agents who can live the good life from the capitalist culture. Thus, the plan the United States federal government and coordinated effort to the 50 states ought to brand their private ownership of handguns. Harvard 2. The coordinated effort approach would involve the coordination of the forced activities. The federal government decided not to devote resources to the federal regulation to the states would sever if they're not ATF agents, state police would begin doing so. The state and federal government should work in a well-coordinated manner. And gun control is the only solution to the pathological militaristic culture predicated and about individualism. Row 15. Liberal band-aid solution to reform does not work. Gun culture normalizing everyday violence by taking black youth and considered disposable. The U.S. government has blood on its head because of refusal to rein in gun law that produces militarization, the love for the unbridled corporate institution. Violence continue to be legitimated by covered acts of politicians, gun law, lobbies who are money into the campaigns, those who support the interest. The gun control that ends violence surely is antibiotic infection, overwhelming everywhere. That has to be taken seriously. The gun culture can be abstracted from the business of violence. One wonders how many have to die before it becomes clear. Gun industry fueling national bloodbath. The use moves from welfare state to welfare state. The violence becomes normalized. Gun violence is tied to economic violence. Attachment to managers, investment companies that make it revolve. The most immediate action is gun laws, and handgun bans are key. When Americans use them as the quintessential weapon, one states to stand against the culture of violence. Volkov 9. The court's explanation why handguns are banned is unconstitutional is the inquiry how law burden my right to their arms. American people have to consider the handgun as quintessential self-defense weapon. The handgun unlimited public weapon choice by self-defense, and mere possibility of concealed handgun chills discourse on controversial issues in schools, halting democracy. Brander 15. Democracy takes away North Korea. The guns are greatly increase the proliferation of guns. Collateral damage, proliferation alters the way we must live. Necessary to consider the impact on college campus. The college classroom is refuge, laboratory. where controversial ideas are aired. Guns are integral to the project. Once a college in Texas witnessed gun fight between arguing to the gun chase and speech, and the 1EC ruptures the mindset of guns necessary for self-defense. People are no longer constantly reminded of guns as means to solving problems. Donahue 15, the government imposed buyback. Donahue 15, the government imposed buyback that reduced gun possession. The murder rate has gone close to 100,000. Who could rate prime minister? The country has experienced a culture share with the guns no longer available for self-defense. The less represented angry groups are no longer reminded that guns to be to adjust to the alleged grievances, and future narratives must be deconstructed. Predictions are not value neutral. They're influenced by the military-industrial complex. Car 10. Military futurism conducting simulations of likely outcomes. Scenario planning provide the US policymaker with the tools to anticipate the surprising military future. All the nexus between military and corporate funding has considered the new military futures different from predecessor to the gun perspective. The contemporary military futures often as extremely pessimistic and depiction security environment. Attacks coming with a new form of expectation result in new willingness among U.S. national security establishment. Consider the strategic shock tendency which generates scenario apocalyptic mood, the social narrative uncertainty, and to mood of the risk military futures emanating to rotate of the non-take action major economic power of the decline and the hegemony. The determination to control down to 8th century is the key component of the new military futures play a very belief future demand of the constant military presence as well. The military tends to see the civilization the worst future of those artificial justified limited military and technical warfare, surveillance, and weapons procurement.
Okay, so what does the advocacy do? You say that the United States federal government in cooperation with the 50 states. What does that mean?
So that's described in the Harwood 2 evidence below. It describes how it would be a coordinated effort between both the federal government and the states and how they would complement each other in a sense. So instances of this could be like the federal government would provide funding for states in instances where they disarm people, and then where the places where the federal government falls short, the states can provide ATF agents in order to make up for that.
Let's talk about Car 10 then. You say that future narratives have to be deconstructed. What exactly constitutes a future narrative?
So Car 10 describes this in the context of like future threats that oftentimes military-industrial complex people will like put forward as like a narrative of the future. For example, some sort of nuclear escalation is going to occur.
That's not what the 1AC is about. It's literally saying that.
No, because this is in the context of like securitized threats.
What's the
1AC is a criticism of this.
Wait, how's the 1AC? Okay, actually that's fine. So it seems that all your offense is like guns are bad. Where exactly do you show where a handgun ban would do anything?
So one, that's not necessarily actually true. Guns are bad in the sense of their symbolic value, which the 1EC Giroux, there are a lot of Giroux cards. The very first
piece of not contradictory. Your Giroux evidence says we have to look at tangible options. And
I'd say that tangible is definitely like existent in symbolic action, because all of our evidence indicates that a symbolic rejection of gun culture leads to then cultural shifts, causes material change. But also the second piece of the second answer I have to this is definitely the DeBrander 15 evidence and the Giroux evidence and the Volkov evidence all indicate that gun control are the only solution. Giroux actually specifically talks about this in the context of 1AC militarism and says that
Giroux says gun control is good. Why does that mean we ban handguns?
So Giroux talks about this at the very beginning. He says that
presumably there's gun control in the statute.
No, incorrect actually. So the 1AC Giroux evidence, both the very first one, but also the first solvency card under the solvency section, both indicate that liberal band-aid solutions such as background checks aren't sufficient because they don't get to the root cause of the problem, which is the existence and the symbolic nature of guns. The 1EC first piece of Giroux evidence actually specifically criticizes current forms of gun control and says that those aren't sufficient and actually mask the problem, and that bans are necessary in order to expose the sort of symbolism of guns in our culture.
Okay. So how's this? So it seems like a large portion of your offense comes from the fact that like guns are used sometimes as a means of self-defense. How is this not strong?
I don't know why that.
How is this not? Your offense is like it feels like this. I forgot what the card name was, but it's about how it atomizes individuals. How's this not straw manning? It says that some individuals buy guns for self-defense, and you're saying that is a bad method just because that's one way that people justify handguns.
I'm very confused at your question. One, that evidence when it talks about it atomizing individuals, talks about how individuals then see themselves as the protector of like whatever instance it may be, whether their life, like their guns from Obama, et cetera, and how that leads to violence because we always otherize people, and this is the exact justification for the military-industrial complex.
Okay.
Start up.
Yeah. So where's the warrant in that card? That's an empirical claim. That's
which card?
Warrant. Gammon 14.
Which one? I don't remember.
First one under.
Oh, Gammon. Oh, no. This card simply indicates that gun culture replicates the same sort of parochialism and nationalism that is exactly used to justify violence in the first place, and says that it is even the existence of guns that causes this, because people see this as an instance where they can use these weapons as like a means to protect themselves. And it says right here, the emphasis on being a liberal subject serves as the guiding ideal for many men in the community. nothing is more suited to become influenced by power than individualism. And that then says that it props up historical pillars of colonialism, capitalism, and patriarchal nationalism.
You off case. So everyone ready? No. Yeah?
He said no.
Oh, okay. Yep. Okay. First, agency by its very nature is inescapable from 09. Agency is closing the operation for collective rational assessment. Contingency agency continuing to operate from the agency assessing whether agency is justified in her engaging agency. One can put agent will determine whether agency is justified. Agency is closing itself. This is two implications. A. Only arguments that conflict in the nature of agents are relevant. This includes non-normative descriptions. Agents only apply the agent situation rather than assessing the situation. Agent we assess the agent self. This means it's incoherent to think of an agent absent normative principles of the agency. B. Theories that stem from the desires of agents are constituted. Those are only states of the constant changing, but rather only ethical theories that stem from the rational will of agents surviving. And constitution tells us we're free to our own action, not ruled by anyone else. It's true for this is true for one reason. First, identifying yourself as a cause of reaction is a necessary condition for agency. Course Card 99. You conceive yourself as the cause of reaction, so identify only choice when you act. Push out desire to A and B, but then compatible favor A or B, so you choose to do A. You regard the choices. You're someone in terms disregard the choices in other force, which happen to favor A, but then you're not the cause of your own action self. But then you're not but the agency requires identification for the principle on which you choose to act. This means that you can't. This also means that the state can't merely just use someone as a means to ends itself. Necessarily violates our own agency, and since we have to look to the constituent nature of agency, agents hear the same truth. The fact that 2 + 2 = 2 is not just true for freedom, but it has to be true for everyone. And a violation of freedom can't be true for everyone since it's non-universalizable. That's Engstrom. And after the sole truth of the soul, to further and resulting contradiction, universal involves considering whether every person considers or shares a judgment as asserting the goodness of the maxim, since all persons do good, the limitation of freedom, extension of their own, they deem good both the extension and limitation of both theirs and others' freedom. Thus, terms respecting freedom. Prefer independently versus active specificity. Societies are just conglomerates of reasoners. Lawrence 11. Collective action be represented instead of rational transition. VC actions as recommended by reason. The reasoning will occur through proper reasoning. Execute their shared objective. Execute their shared objective by reasoning. And impact calc. First, intended harms outweigh foreseen harms. A, if uncalled for intended actions, can never be responsible for all bad things that have intent relation to, which means it would freeze moral actions, since that would be called for all bad things. B, if good will is infinite, so it means that if the action has some bad effect, the intent necessarily outweighs. And C, the intent determines the action, so foreseen harms are irrelevant. Course Card 14. Suppose you're starving and I'm about to eat a sandwich. Suppose I'm attacked by a series of spasms that cause me to make the exact movements I would if I were eating my sandwich. No one exclaim that this has any moral value. An act must be done with some intention to count as an act at all. In order for it to even count as me giving my sandwich, I have to intend to transmit the sandwich from my possession to yours. I contend that a banning handguns violates freedom. This state can't violate one person's property right to achieve some other end. That's 09. One person's property rights constrains other. The property right is structured by the basic requirement of equal freedom. Your property constrains others because you compress external means to which you set your own purposes. Someone interferes with your property and they interfere with your purposes. And it's nonsensical to violate one person's collective property for some greater goods and to a single social entity. That's in 674. Individuals undergo some pain or sacrifice for the greater benefit. Some cost is borne for the overall greater good, but there's no social entity which undergoes a sacrifice for its own good. They're only individual people using one person for the benefit of others, uses them and benefits others. Do you use a person not weightless and sufficiently respect and take into account the fact that they are a separate person? Dissent. Organized crime in the United States is not going out and anytime soon to pose threats, but for the meantime, it's manageable fear for the meantime. That's being the 10. Organized crime activities do not appear to be waning. The relative power in the crime networks will continue to rise. Domestic industries have and may continue to be threatened by organized crime. Gun restrictions and uniform in raids of populace and drive up gun sales. That's asking color 15. Obama called for making it harder to buy weapons on Monday. Stock prices the top gun makers sort of fear of gun restrictions and making the drive up gun sales. As far as passing the effects of mass shootings, especially restrictions that led to an influx of new weapons. Maryland approved the nation searches control by gun sales. Young conservatives responded by pushing for new laws prohibiting the seizure of firearms. Cut the cart at firearms and illegal markets are more convenient and cheap. And turns your case to seal 12.
The sole act required a permit to carry handguns over the sole rifle. The illicit rifle was not only cheaper and easier to obtain the legal pistol, but the seller was much more pleasant to deal with. The cops administering the official process. Plenty of New Yorkers have chosen to go outside of the system. Far more guns are owned illegally within the boundaries of NYC than legally. And prohibition's ineffective. It just creates illegal markets that foster organized crime. That's Zimmerman 15. As I think about gun control, I'm reminded of prohibition, the unintended consequence of growth of organized crime, which gained the revenue stream to reduce the legal nature of the product. Demand remained, and organized crime had a product to sell in business with good demand would still be there. If organized crime would step in, crime would thrive due to a monopoly on firearms. Overall, crime would increase due to would increase and sales would fund organized crime. And organized crime causes global conflict, economic decline, massive weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, and conflicts. That's we should throw O2. Criminals and to corrupt government officials undermine democratic governance and hinder the economic development of many countries. Sierra Leone, for instance, the illegal smuggling and conflict items help to finance a brutal civil war and trafficking, organized criminal networks. Still, regional conflicts otherwise have died down. Russian criminal organizations are involved in smuggling materials for weapons of mass destruction. Terrorism causes extinction, defense mechanism check, and nuclear responses are automated. Barrel 13. War involving the Russian arsenals could have globally catastrophic effects, leading to extinction, command and control, detected first attack launch, a counterattack before suffering damage from the first attack. Russia remain ready to launch terrorist group, not causing an attack that resembles a nuclear attack from another nation. Third-party raise tension for making nations likely to misinterpret events as attacks. Case.
Starting on part 10.
The Part 10 is definitely guilt by association. Just because some people might use extinction scenarios to justify neoliberalism doesn't mean that this is an instance. It means that you definitely have to still respond to internal links. If I'm winning my decided precludes all your offense is consequential, i.e. you guys benefit from solving from the consequences of the plan. However, if we are dead, that means we cannot reap the benefits of the plan. So it means extinction comes first into your framing. Now, I'll roll the ballot between first. Your rolling ballot begs a question of what the implication of gun culture is in the first, what the military culture is in the first place, and how we ought to go about it. If none of your warrants are specific to why it's the state's obligation to actually deconstruct that in the first place. So yes, gun culture might be bad. However, that's not a reason why. But none of your warrants are specific to why that's the state's obligation. So if I'm winning my NC, that's the reason why the state necessarily cannot violate one person's freedom, so freedom for another. Also, you're going to try to get up and make a bunch of arguments as to why oppression is bad and necessarily always bad. However, that begs a question of what that is in the first place. In my NC framework contextualizes how we die. We can view concept, but we can view oppression as something that is a constraint. I.e., you should never oppress someone to achieve any other end, or we could view it as a consequentialist issue. I.e., whether we should be able to oppress 10 people to stop the oppression of 20. However, your framing cannot resolve that, whereas only my framing does. Turns. Gun regulation creates an institutionalized fear of the government. That's episode on Finley 14. Calls for tighter gun control have been reinforced the fears of tyranny. The Second Amendment is believed to be currently under attack. Even cursory readings of program groups reveals this sentiment and empirically confirms stricter gun control leads to more gun sales. That's episode on Finley 14. The fear of tyranny has undoubtedly benefited the gun industry. Fear that resulted in Americans walking to stock up on weapons and gun sales are strong through the roof and purchases and hit an all-time high. And the fear that results from gun ownership is racist and justifies the return to cases. We need to just reinforce the fear that's already in America. Episode on Finley 14. Fear tactics are consistent with capitalism and are manipulates public opinion to push for neoliberal agenda associated with deregulation. The fear of disarmament are often expressions of anxieties when the white man's declining within the white man's declining status. What is at stake is freedom itself, and handgun bans are only make the problem worse. People are just going to switch to deadly weapons, which means that it breeds more distrust in other people and just further atomizes people. That's Copel 93. The high level of substitution of long guns for handguns will occur in the case of American handgun overlooked in the discussion of the substitution effect is resulting from a hypothetical American gun ban is hypothetical evidence that shows from other countries. Let's assume that countries in Australia and Canada where handgun laws are strict, the handgun homicide rate is lower, but the total homicide rate is over 100% greater. One explanation is the substitution effect. Australians and Canadians shooting with rifles and shotguns through their victims' eye, whereas if they had been shot with a cannon, many would survive. So, additionally, they're going to try to make arguments about how the symbolic action of the AF always hurt. That's nonsense. Your evidence, specifically your Joe evidence, says we have to look at tangible action, which means that you should be preferring my turns as to why who actually solves the gun culture in the first place. You cannot say that symbolically does something, because that doesn't mean anything if it doesn't actually create any real world consequence. I.e., if you are increasing the amount of guns in the culture, then that means that it would be networks.
Ready?
Yeah.
How do we come to terms with things in the world of the NC or the framework of the NC where maybe not taking direct action allows for oppression to continue? So, for example, not taking some action, you know that that's going to lead to some like net harm and oppression, but like NC framework would not allow you to take that action.
Sure. So it's not that like you can never solve or do anything about oppression. It's rather a question of how you.
Right. So, for example, like school shootings that like kill like kindergartners and first graders, that is all a product of the gun culture. The framework says that we can't intervene in that instance, or in terms of like limiting guns, because that would limit people's freedom. My question is, what do we do then?
What do we do then? I don't know. I don't think that's a problem for the NC framework. That's just a question of like.
Well, how do we solve then at all?
The idea
if
is
not
that
take away people's guns.
The idea is that you cannot do the you cannot violate someone's freedom to.
Yeah, I understand that. You can't enslave somebody to free other slaves. The explanation about deontology. My question is then, what do we do?
I don't think that's a problem. Again, I don't think that's a problem. That's for the NC.
So the NC would be content with the way the status quo operates because people would be.
The idea is that it would be better than the AF. That's the offense, right? I'm not under a burden to propose a counterplan. That's not the negative burden. I just have to show why the AF, or why we should not be doing the AF.
Alright, so, yeah. Let's quickly talk about the dis-ed. Your uniqueness evidence talks about organized crime in the context of communication technology and cyber terrorism. Then your impact evidence is about illegal markets for like illegal markets from like organized crime and like assault weapons. Like, where is your internal link and like how do those two link up?
Obviously, if you have a legal market, then that just fosters more room for organized crime to step in, right?
Right. There's different types of organized crime, right? Your impact evidence is talking about like types of terrorist organized crime syndicates, but your internal link evidence is about like illegal markets in terms of like organized crime for like guns. How did those two link at all?
Again, those two are not mutually exclusive, right? When you have an illegal market, it
right. So your evidence says that they engage in a host of criminal activities apart from terrorism in Russia, Nigeria, Latin America, East Asia, and elsewhere. Why is that about the United States?
Obviously, what happens in Latin America has a direct influence over.
Where have you read any internal link evidence about that?
I think that's fairly intuitive.
Where? How is that possibly intuitive? You're making a claim about IR and the way that economic security works. That's just intuitive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, when you say it like that, but
how else do you want me to say it?
That what happens in the United States has a direct influence over what happens in Latin America. That's very like they're bordering.
Actually, Latin America doesn't border us.
Well,
but that's fine.
Mexico. Whatever.
So let me get this straight. Your internal link is now actually I didn't start the time. 25 seconds.
Yeah.
20. Your internal link is now like us influences Mexico. Mexico somehow influences Latin America, and then that all links together to lead to extinction.
Sure.
All right. Let's quickly talk about the handgun, Cobalt 93 evidence. You say that actually that's a better amount of time. Three minutes. Order is going to be case, disad, NC.
Are you reading new stuff?
Yeah, I'm emailing it now.
Okay, cool.
Alright, should be sent.
AC decide.
Yeah, on the case it'll start with the framing stuff, then solvency. Also the car stuff, like the security stuff, I'll just do that on the disad. Alright, everyone ready? The rule about to vote for the debater whose advocacy best right break down mail to them. He sets up extra question of gun culture being banned in the first place. He's considered the one to see Giroux says that the gun culture necessary recreates political nationalism, economic Darwinism that reduces the self-down of the individual and thus see as a view of community development that eventually leads to ultimization cause mass violence, which means that you can weigh those impacts together all above this side of the case and independently outweighs, which means that all their impacts inevitably because violence will violence and conflict will inevitably have an absolute decrease in militarization. He's also considered the one to see Giroux says that this justifies a militaristic foreign policy in drone strikes in Middle Eastern countries and also killing black kids on the streets of Chicago, which means that you can weigh that impact against both the dissat and the negative case, because that's all you need this for the affirmative impacts. He says question state obligations. He consider the one in each way, but it says that the state obligation is currently distorted and not being able to view because their consequences to priorities are influenced by via militaristic industrial complex, which also takes out the internally to the NC, because the NC presumes a utopian vision of the world. But the one in evidence indicates that the priorities of the government are already issued. Now he says the next question of pressure in the first place. You might be right. I could even consider that libertarianism is true, but this question of the way we approach libertarianism, our argument is that militarism needs to be gotten rid of prior to evaluating ethical parameters, because it's necessary in order to access ethics in the first place, which means that during the libertarian arguments might be true. Now, off the turns, you say gun control creates fear of the government. The Obama's executive order dumps all of this, and it also proves that there's no need to do these because gun control is already passed, which means that fear is inevitable. Also no unique surrounding the impacts, because there's already racism due to the gun control now, as evidenced by all the violence happening. It's sad to go. You say substitution happens now. One, there's no impeachment. There's two, crossed by all the ones the evidence that says it causes an overall gun culture shift. That all of your internal link evidence about gun control, but our internal link evidence about causing culture shift is from the country that had banned in the first place, which means that only our evidence takes out of account. You say that tangible action is key. All our evidence indicates that symbolic projection will eventually result in tangible action dissent. No link to trust by the argument about Obama's executive order. Also, the plain tells for legal arguments crossed by the culture shift argument that says that the handgun-based specifically. He's considered the argument that Americans view them as a quintessential weapon, which means that results in symbolic projection, an overall shift away from guns, which also solves the internally to all the case turns. Also, no unique to also there's no unique about actually their prediction and empirical claims are false crossed by the car evidence that says that we securitize impacts in order to make worst case claims. You say that still have to answer the internal links, but all of our arguments say that your internal links are suspect at best and not able to resolve the violence action to the world. Also, case solves lack restriction makes trafficking easier. Medical 12 lack regulation for electrification over the West Bank vigilance out of the environment to use control laws opposed to making the prosecution those accused of transacting the cartel more difficult. And U.S. controls key Melco 12 done 90% of what would be used under the drug wars to maintain the U.S. Mexico stricter gun laws and the questions lenient regulation the U.S. Tom tracking and the which the U.S. gun policy will continue without a culture shift. Now in the NC, universal principle failed because of the rarity objection perfect love and suppose like somebody while the woman is eating strawberry or the being last week. I think that could rational will and back to the universalized because we all know it's likely that anyone else will be able to act precisely in this way. And deontology is just status quo bias, which is rational shuffle safety. We should have prepared shepherd the better state of affairs and favor prejudice and existing attribution of the one promoted morality, supports such passivity as idolize the world, rather should be in constitutivism fails people just be smagents and enough alone. They should need not care about qualification, agent, action. They can be smagent, not agent. They can think of constitutive action to simulate agent, otherwise possible. Reply so it was term that qualifies the agent. She would analogous something into and just have qualities of the chessboard. He doesn't care about the middle mission pieces qualified chess player. The status quo being constituted agency is not specified nor non-arbitrary status. And states can have some unified intent down fails for the good 95 deontological theory. Remember to state the theory that the acquisition motive to make up to no sense program deliberation takes not place under the different circumstances or regard the operating collective manner. And empirically, there's no single aim of constitutive action. Ben Mosh Chan would regard the recent action of the agent for being an agent. The minds are not really algorithm performing. We've seen some mental activities, some phase attack, the operative field, sixes, and the belief in the hard to see that other than be one aspect of agency constitutive action. And coercing people to take part in collective moral duties is justified doing 95 into liquid or worse people more from morally conscious and people can separate categories entering more credit that to pay off and just calling the morality can be traded the experience the possibility of the compensated people go to the wrong to justify forcing people to pay collective moral enterprise so other may pay part of them too and failure to enforce collective moral duties undermines moral agency could 95 people when guys conduct being harmed the agency failure to discharge collective responsibility for grievous conflict undermines people the more agency compensation is impossible. Mark the card of that impossible.
The argument that militarism is a prerequisite of ethics?
That was made in a couple of different ways. One is that we can concede that certain ethical theories might be true, but that doesn't necessarily answer the argument about distortion and how our current view of the way we evaluate ethics is distorted. And getting rid of militarism is a prerequisite in order to evaluating ethical theories in any sort of coherent manner. The second one was that all of your ethical leaders rely upon some sort of utopian conception of the world, and all of our arguments indicate that that sort of utopian conception is exactly what justifies violence in the first place, where we only evaluate actions based on how they affect individuals and not the community in general. The third argument is that libertarianism is exactly what economic Darwinism is, because it forces people to individualize and atomize themselves, which is exactly what justifies otherization and violence in the first place.
Okay.
So that eventually leads to more magnifications of violence. And the fifth, I've lost count. The next argument is the Giroux evidence that says that the current way that the state engages in action is one that is distorted in view. So even if we are able to engage in ethics, this is not a good application in terms of like how to fix state problems, because the state inevitably will want to protect this sort of economic Darwinism. So relying upon them to make like ethical decisions is exactly what they use to justify violence in the first place. I believe that is it. Let me check. Yeah. And then like so I use some of the case offenses like weighing against the NC.
Order is going to be ACNC.
Sorry, say that again?
ACNC. Okay. So we ready?
Yeah.
Stop the AC.
Okay. Broad undercovers the two main turns on the case. So go to the episode of Finley, extend the first episode of Finley card that that gun control just feeds into America's fear of tyranny. Your only argument against this is that it's not unique because gun control is in the status quo. However, obviously this is not a binary argument, or it's not a binary argument, but rather it's scalar. It's the idea that you increase it exponentially, which is exponentially worse. I.e., a ban is definitely worse than some slight executive action on gun control. So you've also conceded the second episode of Finley card that it's empirically verified because it's empirically verified because it's already increased sale of guns. Now you've also you can extend the last episode of Finley card that whenever you that this fear feeds into like neoliberalism, because it's the idea that we're still resisting the government. So very clear, turns your case. Only analysis is that it's on unique. That doesn't apply here. It's not a binary. Now off Copel. Your only argument against Copel is that there's no empirics. However, that's exactly what Copel is. Rather, it is an analysis of Canada and Australia, where they have the strictest gun control measures in the nation. So it is empirical. So it is definitely is empirical analysis. Just as that the switch, the analysis is specifically that they switch from handguns to using more deadly guns, which means that they just root more fear into the other. Because whenever you confront the other and you have a fear, and rather than shooting with a handgun, you're shooting them with a more deadly weapon, which just means that you exponentially make that balance worse. You see how it's a cultural shift. However, the idea is that that's exactly what Copel criticizes, or at least when they challenge me the assumption. Rather, it's saying that yes, in Canada and Australia there might be less deaths by handguns. However, if you look at the overall murder rate, it's over 100% greater than America. That's because of the substitution effect, which you have conceded. Now go to the arguments on the roll of ballot he makes. The arguments he makes on the roll of ballot. I don't know what order you have them in. So the first argument is that the NC is a utopia. However, that's not a reason why it's inherently bad. Rather, that's just a reason why we should try to strive for that utopia. We should strive for that utopia. So the NC is at least a step in the right direction. Your second argument is that the state obligation is currently distorted. However, that begs the question of what constitutes distortion in the first place. If I'm only my NC affirmative, then that means that it's necessarily that means that NC affirmative is necessarily constrained on that. You also say it reduces us to individuals and atomizes us. However, obviously you'll lose. Obviously it's still a consequentialist impact, which so that all your arguments presuppose you're winning consequences. That also takes your argument about how militarism is empirical to ethics, which you cannot, because that still presupposes that we care about consequences in the first place. Now, I lied a bit. Let's go to the Ask and Keller argument on the dissad. Okay, so even if you think he doesn't have any uniqueness, or even if you think I'll agree that the impact of the dissad doesn't have. However, you can see the Ask and Keller argument. That was the argument that gun controls in any form of raging populace, which means that you drive up the sale of guns. You drive up the sale of guns. That's purely verified. It's happened in Maryland. It's also happened in Washington D.C., which means that you increase more guns in society, which turns your case. You can see 100% conceded analysis. This is why this is a case. The no uniqueness argument definitely doesn't apply here. It definitely doesn't apply here because the idea is that yes, even if there is gun control, the status quo, the idea is you make it worse. That's the same argument like on episode of Finley. So you can also the symbolic argument definitely you can cross play the symbolic argument that you can't vote on the after symbolic reason because that's contingent upon winning that the AC has some good consequence. So you can vote there. Now NC. He dumps a lot of cohorts against the NC. However, the problem is he's still conceiving meta-ethic, and all the arguments under help him to some level responding to arguments. So you can extend the first row card, extend for row and 9. That agency is necessary condition for all ethics. You can also conceive the point that says that you can impute the nature of the state, or that the nature of the state is not the nature of the state is the constituent nature of the state has to be part of the will. It cannot be part of the situation of the state, which means all arguments about how militarism, empirical ethics, and how the state of that don't apply, because that's just a situation of the state. Rather, it's not inherent to the constituent nature of the state. Now, you only argument that might apply to this Enoch is about space agency. However, even if you call yourself a space agent, you're still an agent, so it still applies to the same idea. So it means that it's just a semantic difference. It doesn't have any function. Doesn't have any function. Your argument's not nearly being fleshed out enough for you to actually vote here. Now let's go to the line by line. Also, you conceded angstrom. So extend angstrom that whenever the truth has to be true for everyone. For example, 2 plus 2 cannot be true for me. It can't just be true for me, but it has to be true for everyone, which means violation of freedom can't be true for everyone, which is independent reason why you prefer my framing, because it means that anything else that is contradictory. You've also gotten to the intent foresight distinction. That was the course card 14. That the intent is necessary for the determination of the action for determining what action is in the first place. Now let's go to his arguments. Off Parfit. The Parfit argument doesn't make any sense. Yes, there can be you can will a particular situation. For example, you could will that only Richard is allowed to murder people. However, the idea is that that's not relevant. The subject of the action is not relevant, but rather it's what you are actually willing in the first place. For example, my willing of murder is what is bad. So it takes it means that perfect just misunderstanding content. Your second argument is the status quo bias. However, that's not the reason why you should disregard if I'm winning the end is the status quo bias, that's the reason why you should disregard the NT. That's just guilt by association. Just because I'm in the status quo defend the status quo, it's not the reason why it's inherently subject or is an independent reason why you reject it, but you still have to be responding to the warrant to the NC framework. So if I'm winning the NC framework, that's the reason why you would go there. Your second, I've already responded to Enoch. Let's go to no intent. Good to misunderstand what it means for the state to have an intent. When I say the state has an intent, it does not mean that you actually intend. It does not mean that they literally intend to do something. For example, the state cannot intend to ban handguns to achieve X end, but rather it is specific that whenever it's rather the question is what is necessary for the nature of the action to happen. For example, in order to pass gun restriction, it is inconceivable for you to pass gun restriction absent violating someone's freedom. So that's exactly what the intent is. Means that you understand how this necessarily works. Your next argument is that there's empirically no social empowerment. That doesn't make any sense. You can't empirically say that there's not a social because it's something that we debate on the abstract. Also, you see the mental, and you also talk about mental activities. However, again, that just cross-play argument I made against Gooden off the last Gooden card about how failure to enforce movies undermines moral agency. This is the relation of moral agency to the first. You can accept the implications under moral agency. Made very clear that moral agency is not something that you're rather thrown into, but rather it's the nature of the agent in the first place. What the will of the agent is inherently has to be what's inherently bound to the nature of the agent. So it means that you can misunderstand what agency is in the first place, or at the very least you're talking about different things. You can also extend he knows a card into the opposite. You can't that there's no social entity, which means that you cannot will one person violate one person's freedom for a better of society. So go ahead.
Alright, 3 minutes.
disadd NC. And I'll do all the rolled about stuff on the NC.
On the NC?
Yeah. Alright. Everyone ready?
No. Yep.
Economic Darwinism promotes individualism that eventually leads to other causes mass bonds between individuals. This was the conceded Giroux evidence and the criticism of libertarianism that says when we evaluate each other as individual agents and only focus on individual libertarian and preventing coercion, that and eventually leads to other agents being able to dominate other agents, which means that libertarian approach inevitably leads to more violations of freedom via even the intent of using a libertarian framework, which means that is a bad framework for say to approach because it just maintains military industrial complex. Now on the turns, he says that leads to a fear in the government. Obama's executive order means you have a linear impact at best, and there's no link unique because all your effects already have it. Also, you've considered the argument that we saw the impact of the case, which is the brand evidence and the common evidence that says this sort of parochial nationalism is exactly what gun culture justified in the first place. He's considered the argument that we are symbolic projection of gun culture that eventually leads to a decrease in the sort of violence, which is one is the evidence about how the handguns are a quintessential weapon. Now he says that substitution causes one is we saw the impact of the case. He's considered the culture shift argument. His only argument is that but it does lead to more deaths. Well, our argument is that we lead to an overall shift, which Rose says is necessary in order to prevent further violence in other areas. You also say that there's also no impact calculus, which means that symbolic protection definitely outweighs because it decreases militarization and foreign intervention in other countries that cause the deaths of thousands of other people, which means that substitution that infinitely outweighs. Now with the dissent, you say that you increase the sale of guns. Obama's executive order definitely comes because there's no uniqueness, right? There's no link uniqueness. People should have already gone to buy other guns. You've also considered the argument that says that we are able to resolve things like the illegal market and increase sale of guns because of decreased lax regulation. Now in the NC, you've considered the argument that absent a decrease in militarism, your argument about how we should strive towards utopia do not matter because state liberalism inevitably justifies the state continuing its domination and control of the body, which means that militarism is a prerequisite to evaluating ethics in the first place. Because evaluating ethics in the first place, which is all the Giroux evidence that says that the way we conceptualize the state is via this distortion of militarism and simply using a libertarian approach simply justifies the state's continued domination because they're the ones in power. Now, you've uncovered two main arguments. One is the sum agency argument that says that the only way we can that being an agent doesn't matter because we can simply call ourselves sum agents. That takes away the constitutional duty in the first place. He says that we're still agents in the first place, but inescapability and agency doesn't answer this Enoch 60. Think about finding a game of chess you can argue with. If you don't have a normative reason, the game even to argue with, you continue to go through the motion. Neither here nor there, nothing short of the normative claims. Settle the normative question. Also, your argument about how you're still an agent doesn't matter because you can simply call yourself sum agent, and therefore escape the constitutivism arguments in the first place because you lack the internal link about why being a sum agent still requires you to act upon your constitutive aims, which means that your argument about how you still have to focus on freedom don't make any sense because that still seems to some sort of constitutional obligation in the first place. The second one is the Gooden argument that says it's coercing people to take part in collective moral duties to justify, which the good 95 evidence says that the morally conscious people keep separate categories and how moral credit and material payoffs and direct columns, which means that inevitably you can still take actions in order to coerce freedom in order to fulfill some greater more collective action, but simply evaluating just on an individual level doesn't take into account how ethics operates in the first place, which means that forcing people to play their part in sort of collective moral enterprise comes first.
think is empirically denied by all the case arguments and the link arguments on the dissed that the neg goes for. The negs try to substantiate what it means to have a gun culture, so having lots of guns, like the volume of guns, the types of violence that guns create, the murder rate, etc., and it said that the AF will not result in a reduction of any of those things. There are 3 cards. The first that I think is good is the Koppel 93 evidence. It says they'll switch to deadlier kinds of guns, and there will be more deadlier violence, and I think that this denies your claim that we can solve violence in other areas, and you extend a card out of the AF, which I look at, which says that Australia's culture shifted, but that's really all it says. And he has better evidence, I think, on this, saying that Australia's murder rate went up 100%, even if its handgun violence rate decreased. So overall, there's more violence because of stricter gun controls or a gun ban. So I think that that substantially mitigates your ability to get offense on the case, if not turning the entirety of the case, because there will be violence, and I think that's your internal link to, well, what you explain in the 2AR is violence in other areas. And I think this is exactly, his evidence is talking about violence in other areas, and it's much more explicit and empirical than any of the extensions from the 1AR or any of the cards that I look at in the 1AC. The second card is on the disad, the illegal markets turn, or the, what is it tagged as? It enrages the populace, driving up the sale of guns. I don't think you have any counter-empirics to this, and I think the card is good. It says it's happened in Maryland and DC on previous gun control issues. The response in the 2AR and the response that you have to both of these arguments is the same. You're like, but this is linear and there's no uniqueness for this. But both of these arguments are, in theory, are turning the case, because all of your arguments are about decreasing the amount of guns and the violence that happens because of guns and the culture. I think if having a linear advantage or disad is a problem, then I think that's equally a problem for the AF. I don't think this is a brink impact. I think it's perfectly fine that it's a linear impact, and the way you treat it in the 2AR is that, oh, well, the fact that it's linear just means it's a bad DA and I don't have to spend a lot of time on it. But I don't think that's the case. I think that if he's right, then these are true solvency turns, and you don't contest the warrants in either of these pieces of evidence. One thing you do say in the 2AR in response to the second card is that there will be more regulation, but I don't have any solvency extended from you or any warranted argument in the 1AC that says why regulations would solve for buying tons of guns and more guns entering circulation before the ban actually becomes enforced and goes into effect on a wide scale. Other things that you say, I think the AF tactic is a good one to avoid a lot of the empirics debate and say you're solving for the culture, but I think you need a better argument for why, like, just the idea of a ban is enough to get people to be less violent and to promote a entirely different culture. Just the fact that there is a ban passed, and I just don't know how you deal with these case terms, and I just don't have a good enough explanation. I don't think I have much else to say about that. I don't end up looking at the NC, although I think that you're close to losing in that debate as well. Just because you don't have a lot of proactive framework justifications. I thought your debate on Enoch was good. I thought you got around to explaining what the warrant in the 1AR evidence was, but he obviously has other justifications for the NC framework, so I thought that was a little scary for you. The angstrom extension and the intent foresight distinction argument are proactive justifications for the NC. The reason I don't end up looking at the NC is just this militarism prerequisite argument, which I don't have a response to from Richard in the 2NR. He says that the culture biases us against or in favor of individualism and in favor of the status quo. And this is the only real comparative framework argument there is. So when you're extending your NC justifications, you need to do a much better job of applying them to the few framework justifications that the AF tries to give. So when you're extending angstrom, you need to explain why is it really important that there is a contradiction in our will. Like what's the impact to that, basically? And I don't mean in a consequential sense, but you have to do a much better job of blowing Yeah, that's all I have.
Cool. Yeah, I think Bob's explanation is plausible. I think one of the problems with this debate is that there isn't a lot of great, well, I don't have a great understanding of sort of what it would mean, or what offense either side is getting. So I think that Virat, you have and it's sort of an explanation, but I think a very quick explanation of 1AR, a little bit better than 2AR, about what it means to solve gun culture, and ultimately I think that it's a little bit stronger. So where I come out is I think that you say, sort of what Richard wins is that there will be a little bit more gun violence, but I don't get a clear connection from that investment why like the violence itself or like the number of deaths is like tied to the framework of like the culture. And so I think your explanation of why like passing a law that bans guns even if it results in more violence will like start a dialogue that will in the long run solve these kinds of problems, reduce the culture. You mentioned the Dugrander stuff about how the current situation chills discussion, and then we'll solve nationalism later. I think that's probably where you're ahead. I agree that the whole like brain linear discussion is not super relevant, but I think that the Nick needed to do a better job of explaining why the fact that there will be more gun deaths from the substitution effect means that we're like having a worse gun culture in comparison to, for instance, the fact that we're like passing a big law that expresses the fact that like we are like rejecting guns or something like that. So there's like the question of what actually happens in the world versus like the sort of symbolism of that. I think one other thing I wanted to mention, and this is not super relevant in the NC because I think the framework debate is sort of close enough where in the worst case I would use epistemic modesty and sort of compare the offense and the flow, but I think that on the framework level, Farad is ahead. I think on both on the militarism argument and I think on the Enoch response. So Richard, you extend Ferraro and then argue against Enoch that if you're a schmagent or an agent, you're like it's like the same thing. But I think the question Farad asks is like why does the fact that someone is necessarily an agent or a schmagent or whatever like obligate them to act in certain ways? So like the Enoch article talks about how like if you're playing a chess game, like you can like be forced to play chess, but like you can like reject the premise that like chess is important or that like chess is something you need to play, and like the normative value of that. So I think you need to be responding to it. I also think you need to be doing a better job. I mean, obviously not in sort of like doesn't become relevant in the 2AR, but the sort of Parfit argument is pretty good, which is that you can like universalize more specific maxims, and I think that your response that like no, like you could also not do that is like not particularly compelling. Like you should explain why that is not an objection that matters, or like why you should have to, why like your framework requires you to use like the more general example of murder. Also, I think that the NC could just be stronger. Like if your like your framework about like could be much better and tailored to like a specific form of freedom that involves the things like self-defense. I think like you end up making it a very generic case, which is like any sort of interference in my freedom ever, which seems like just like that libertarianism. I don't know, like what wouldn't be an interference, and like then it seems like there would be, you know, if I was evaluating both sides of the flow, it seems like it would be like the least amount of uniqueness you could ever have. It would be like the sense tension.
It's way too easy for the 1AR to make all these arguments about how this is exactly what the 1AC criticizes about individualism.
Yeah,
and then you just did that, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a more nuanced NC, his more generic 1AR cross-apps are not as good.
Okay. Yeah.
I actually thought of two other things while Daniel was speaking. One thing, Richard, that you should say, and it's just true in response to these like gun controls, Obama, EXO, non-uniques, everything you've said is you just have to say that that cuts both ways. If gun control's coming in this flow and that eliminates the DAs, then that should also solve gun culture and solve your AF, so you don't have a big impact.
Yeah, I really need a more like the best thing would be like a more meaningful explanation of like what it means to what culture refers to, and also like how violence ties into that, and how, you know, what part of that informs. Because my understanding of the app is that the most strategic use of the app would be not relying on like the details of like violence and substitution, but like rather like talking about cultural shifts and like how this like is like a meaningful step towards change, which is sort of like how I think it should be run more. And I think that that's like what I thought you did enough there, but you know, I think it was close enough to where I think you really need to frame it better, because
yeah, I mean, I think there's just not enough in this debate. The 1NC makes an argument on case that says symbolic action is great, but your Giroux card says we really do need material change, so we don't care about symbolic action unless there are real world consequences. And then in the 1AR, your answer to that is, oh, but I am real world consequences, I am tangible. And that seems to give credence to all of these neg case turns that are about empirics and the actual gun violence that occurs.
So I guess my one question for you would be, I thought I explained the internal link as like a rejection of weapons is necessary in order to like start a dialogue and have a cultural shift that eventually solves for the terminal impact of that. So like gun culture doesn't, or gun violence doesn't turn case. It doesn't access the internal link.
But who is rejecting weapons?
The government.
So okay.
And the argument that like the one
So
he
do you
the
have
American
a card that says that the government doing something then trickles down to what everyone will believe once a policy passed? And does that really avoid the case turn that says, no, when gun bans get passed, everyone will just go buy guns and buy really deadly shotguns and kill each other just as much?
Well,
like,
that is reasonable, but
I mean,
I guess no. My question is more so like all the evidence that's like Americans view handguns as like the quintessential weapon, and like how that rejection then leads to like further dialogue, which is all like the Goman and Brander evidence.
Okay, so your wing could be like my evidence is about Americans' individual psyche and what they think versus. But he has cards that say that his cards say that what happens is that people go buy shotguns. So you're still debating the empirical claim and saying no, Americans really care about their handguns a lot, and they wouldn't go, or it just doesn't matter if they kill each other with shotguns. That seems to matter for the average.
Well, I feel like in the 2 and R, like a lot of what you're saying is premised upon like empirics being most important coming first, but like I just don't really hear that in the 2 and R.
I don't think it's most important. I just think it is that it is relevant to determining whether the AF decreases gun culture is a bunch of the claims.
Yeah, like where does he do that analysis? Because I feel like ultimately it's just like extend the turn. This is what the turn says.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the 2 and R could do a lot more work and a lot more depth, but I think he's so cleanly winning the warrants on this. So it's a question of does it turn case or not. I don't think you have a really great explanation.
No, I guess that's my question. Like, does he explain why it turns case?
He says that'll increase the murder rate. That seems relevant to what a gun culture is. I don't know what a gun culture is if it's not any of those things that the next
Yeah, that's reasonable. Yeah.
So
I think it goes back to the explanation, or the thing of just like AF doing a better job.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And like setting a story, because I think that I don't know. I think it's like a good example of where like the perception, like whether something turns case depends a lot on like how the AF frames it. And I think that different judges can like just see that.
Yeah,
as
definitely.
well. So.
The last thing I'll say is I thought you did. I was kind of confused about your framework debate because last debate you were very much line by line, very technical in the 1NC, and I thought you did a really good job, especially in prospects against Jonas's utilaf. It was kind of a weird. It was completely different in this debate. You just read like 6 cards, and I think in the 1AR, especially, I think you don't have time to read a ton of cards, and I think it would have been better if you had line by line like the Angstrom card, because you know that's what he's going to go for, and you know that's what he wants to do. Reading like the 3rd Gooden card is